Kyle Busch has gone more than 100 consecutive races without a win. Let that number sink in for a moment. 100 races. For a driver with 2 Cup Series championships, 60-plus Cup wins, and a reputation that made the entire NASCAR field uncomfortable on Sunday afternoons, that drought is not just a slump, it is a statement. This is the man who used to show up every single week and make elite drivers look ordinary. The menace. The closer. The guy who could turn a mediocre car into a top 5 and a good car into a trophy. That version of Kyle Busch felt untouchable, and now the NASCAR world is asking a very serious question. What in the world happened to him at Childress Racing, and why is Dale Earnhardt Jr. the one stepping forward to say the things that nobody inside RCR seems willing to say out loud? Just 10 races into the 2026 Cup Series season, Childress Racing made a move that sent a clear signal to everyone paying attention. Jim Pullman was removed as crew chief on the number 8 car. Andy Street was brought in to replace him. Teams in NASCAR do not make changes like this casually, and they certainly do not make them this early in a season unless something is genuinely broken. This was not a calculated, strategic adjustment made from a position of confidence. This was a response to a pattern of failure that had become impossible to ignore, and there is nothing dishonest about calling it what it is, a panic move made under pressure. The numbers that forced this decision are damning. The number 8 car posted 5 consecutive finishes outside the top 20 heading into this change. 5 races in a row buried deep in the running order. That is not bad luck. That is not a series of unfortunate circumstances. That is a consistent, measurable failure to perform at a competitive level, and it tells a story that finish position data almost never lies about. There was one moment of relief, a top 10 finish at Talladega, but anyone who follows this sport closely knows that superspeedway results are heavily influenced by drafting, strategy, and chaos, making them poor indicators of a team's true baseline performance. One Talladega top 10 does not erase what happened in the other 4 races, and it does not answer the deeper question that this crew chief change now forces everyone to ask: is Andy Street walking into a genuine opportunity to turn this program around, or is he walking into a situation that is far more complicated than a personnel change can fix? Before digging into what Dale Earnhardt Jr. actually said, it is worth understanding why his voice carries so much weight in a conversation like this one. Radio chatter between a frustrated driver and his crew happens every single weekend across the entire Cup Series garage. Drivers say things in the heat of competition that sound alarming when clipped and posted to social media. This is not new, and it is not unique to Kyle Busch. But when Kyle Busch, a driver more than 100 races deep into a winless streak, gets caught on the radio showing frustration, every word becomes a headline. Every syllable gets analyzed. The gap between what was expected of him when he joined RCR and what has actually happened on the racetrack is so enormous that even routine frustration sounds like a crisis. When Kyle Busch signed with Childress Racing, the expectation was clear. He was supposed to be the cornerstone of a revitalized program. He was supposed to bring a winning culture, a championship mindset, and the kind of competitive intensity that lifts everyone around him. Instead, the results have trended in the wrong direction, and the radio drama that has surfaced is less important for what was actually said and more important for what it represents: a team that has not yet found its rhythm and a driver who is feeling the pressure of a drought that no former champion wants to be associated with. Dale Earnhardt Jr. went on the Dale Jr. download and delivered a take that was direct, honest, and more nuanced than most of the commentary currently surrounding this situation. His core argument was straightforward: changing crew chiefs mid-season is one of the hardest things a team can recover from within the same year. It is not a reset button. It is not an instant fix. It is, in many ways, more disruption piled on top of existing disruption, and disruption is exactly what the number 8 team does not need more of right now. Think about what a mid-season crew chief change actually requires. A new voice on the radio. A new set of philosophies around pit strategy, tire management, and race day adjustments. A new working relationship between crew chief and driver that takes time, communication, and shared experience to develop properly. All of that has to be built from scratch while the season is already slipping away, while the point standings are already telling an uncomfortable story, and while the pressure to perform is higher than it has ever been. Dale Jr. has made these calls. He has sat in those uncomfortable team meetings where everyone knows a change has to be made but nobody is entirely sure what comes next. He knows, from direct experience as both a driver and a team owner, how difficult it is to pull off a meaningful turnaround after a move like this. That does not mean it cannot work. Dale Jr. was not saying RCR made the wrong call. What he was saying is that the expectations attached to this change need to be realistic. One great race does not mean the corner has been turned. Progress in NASCAR is not always linear, and a team rebuilding chemistry mid-season has to be evaluated over weeks, not weekends. Dale Jr. also made a point of defending Jim Pullman, and that moment deserves more attention than it has received in most of the coverage surrounding this story. Pullman is not some inexperienced figure who stumbled into a Cup Series crew chief role. He is respected throughout the garage. He is passionate about his work. He is experienced. And yet the partnership between Pullman and the number 8 team simply did not click the way everyone hoped it would. That happens in NASCAR. Two talented people with legitimate credentials can be put together and fail to find the kind of chemistry that a top-level Cup team needs to compete at the front of the field every week. Placing the full weight of the situation on Jim Pullman misses the bigger picture entirely. The chemistry was not there, and that is not a failure that belongs exclusively to one person. Crew chief and driver relationships are collaborative by nature. They require trust, communication, and a shared instinct about how to attack a racetrack and manage a race. When that connection is not developing, the performance suffers, and what we have seen from the number 8 car in 2026 is precisely that kind of performance suffering. Dale Jr. also made a point that is easy to overlook in the noise of social media commentary and hot takes: none of us are in that building. The fans, the analysts, the podcasters, the people writing the headlines, none of them are sitting in the meetings at Childress Racing. None of them are hearing the conversations happening between engineers, strategists, and the ownership group. What is visible from the outside, the radio snippets, the finish positions, the press conference soundbites, represents a tiny fraction of a much larger and more complex picture. RCR has resources. They have Richard Childress himself, one of the most experienced and battle-tested team owners in the history of this sport. They have people working around the clock to identify the problems and develop the solutions. The situation is not as simple as social media makes it look, and the path forward is not as obvious as fire this person or bench that driver. There are layers to this that the public simply does not have access to, and that humility, the willingness to acknowledge the limits of outside knowledge, is part of what made Dale Jr.'s take so valuable. Kyle Busch heard the criticism. He heard the suggestions that he had checked out, that his effort had dropped, that he did not care about RCR the way he cared about his previous teams, and he pushed back. "I've given everything to this team. I've worked as hard as I possibly can," Busch responded, and he was not pointing fingers at the people around him. He was doing the opposite, praising them. He acknowledged that the equipment is there. The support is there. The talent is inside that building. And still, the wins have not come. Sit with that for a moment. Being a former champion, a two-time champion, and working as hard as you know how to work, while standing in a garage full of capable people, and still not being able to get back to victory lane is a unique and painful kind of frustration. It does not go away after a good practice session or a strong qualifying lap. It lives with a competitor like Kyle Busch every single day of the season, and it shapes every conversation, every strategy call, and every moment on the racetrack. His response to the criticism was not the response of a man who has stopped caring. It was the response of a man who cares deeply and cannot yet find the answer. Andy Street now has one of the most challenging assignments in the 2026 Cup Series season. The pressure attached to this role is real, and the way he handles it will define a significant portion of how the NASCAR community views him going forward. Success in the short term does not necessarily mean a win. It means visible, measurable improvement. It means better communication with Kyle Busch on the radio. It means smarter strategic calls in the middle stages of a race. It means a team that looks and feels more settled on race day than it has in the opening months of the season. The wins can come later, but the culture inside that number 8 pit box needs to change first. A driver of Kyle Busch's caliber can execute at a high level when he trusts the voice in his ear and believes in the calls being made. Building that trust is Andy Street's most important job right now, and it is not something that happens in one race weekend. It requires consistency, clarity, and a willingness to communicate honestly even when the results are not where they need to be. Kyle Busch in 2026 is one of the most compelling storylines in all of NASCAR. A generational talent. A team in transition. A crew chief shakeup 10 races into the season. And a Hall of Famer delivering uncomfortable truths from the outside while the people inside the building figure out how to move forward. The question is not whether Kyle Busch is still capable of winning at this level. Most people who know this sport believe he is. The question is whether Andy Street, RCR, and Kyle Busch himself can find the right formula before the season becomes a complete loss. Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s warning deserves to be taken seriously. Do not expect this change to fix everything immediately. Patience is required. But patience is an extremely difficult thing to maintain when you are already more than 100 races deep into a drought that nobody saw coming. Now it is your turn to weigh in. Do you think Kyle Busch breaks the streak before this season ends? Is this crew chief change the spark that RCR needed, or is it rearranging deck chairs on a sinking ship? Drop your take in the comments. This is exactly the kind of debate that the NASCAR community was built for. And if you made it this far, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is far from over and we will be covering every development as it happens.